Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, will global turmoil take place on August 22nd? Now, before you start getting upset, I know the name of this channel is End Times Bible Prophecy with Britt Gillette. I'm not talking about a date for the rapture. I'm not setting a date. This has nothing to do with the rapture. This has to do with a change in global geopolitical power and turmoil in the global financial markets. And there is possibly a big event taking place on August 22nd. So just a couple of months away from now. And I believe we very well could see that. But I'm not saying that, even though, again, I believe we very well could see that on that day. But who is saying that? Well, Jim Rickards is saying that. Who is Jim Rickards? Let's take a look right here. Here's Jim Rickards' bio. You can read over this. I'm going to put a link to all of this in the description so you can go check it out for yourself. But it says here, Jim Rickards is an American lawyer, economist, and investment banker with 40 years of experience working in capital markets on Wall Street. He was the principal negotiator of the rescue of long-term capital management by the Federal Reserve in 1998. That was an event that almost led to a breakdown of the global financial system, and it was avoided at the last moment. He's the author of numerous best-selling books on currency and the monetary system and the financial system. So Jim Rickards, he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the global financial system and the monetary system, finance in general. He also, if you go back and read his work, predicted long ago that Russia would invade Ukraine. We would have a NATO Western Alliance alignment against Russia, because he's been involved in a number of wargaming exercises as well. So he long predicted that years and years before it actually occurred in 2022. So my point is, Jim Rickards is someone to be taken seriously. So what is he saying? Well, he's saying this right here. The title of this is Rickards Drops Bombshell. Let's see what he has to say. It says, on August 22nd, about 2.5 months from today, the most significant development in international finance since 1971 will be unveiled. Now, let me step back. I've read a number of Jim Rickards' articles over the years. He is not one for hyperbole and clickbait and making up these big bold claims. So to say the most significant development in 52 years, and of course he's referring to the August 15th, 1971 closing of the gold window by President Nixon, which severed all remaining ties between the dollar and gold at that time, and put the United States onto a complete fiat currency, meaning there's nothing backing up the US dollar except people's faith that it has value. And of course, we've seen how much that faith is worth as we've seen inflation ever since. And we've seen it especially in the last couple of years. So the dollar's lost, I think, 98% of its value relative to gold. Its purchasing power of gold over that time. And so to say the most significant development, that's making a bold claim. So this goes on. He says it involves the rollout of a major new currency that could weaken the role of the dollar in global payments and ultimately displace the US dollar as the leading payment currency and reserve currency. It could happen in just a few years. The process by which this will happen is unprecedented, and the world is unprepared for this geopolitical shockwave. This monetary shock will be delivered by a group called the BRICS, and we've talked about this in the past. I'm going to pull some of the videos that we've done in the past, link to those in the comments so that you can go check those out as well, because we've been saying this is coming, and now he's saying it's coming as well. He's also been saying it's coming. A lot of people have. So this shouldn't come as a surprise. It says the acronym BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This play for global reserve currency status by the BRICS will affect world trade, direct foreign investment, and investor portfolios in dramatic and unforeseen ways. The most important development in the BRICS system concerns the expansion of BRICS membership. This has led to the informal adoption of the names BRICS Plus for the expanded organization. There are currently 8 nations that have formally applied for membership and 17 others that have expressed interest in joining. The 8 formal applicants are Algeria, Argentina, Bahrain, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The 17 countries that have expressed interest are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Senegal, Sudan, Syria, Thailand, Tunisia, Turkey, Uruguay, Venezuela, and Zimbabwe. There's more to this list than just increasing the head count at future BRICS meetings. As Saudi Arabia and Russia are both members, you have 2 of the 3 largest energy producers in the world under one tent. The U.S. is the other member of the energy big 3. If Russia, China, Brazil, and India are all members, you have 4 of the 7 largest countries in the world measured by land mass, possessing 30% of the Earth's dry surface and related natural resources. Almost 50% of the world's wheat and rice production, as well as 15% of the world's gold reserves, are in the BRICS nations. Meanwhile, China, India, Brazil, and Russia are 4 of the 9 highest population countries on the planet, with a combined population of 3.2 billion people, or 40% of the Earth's population. China, India, Brazil, Russia, and Saudi Arabia have a combined GDP of $29 trillion, or 28% of nominal global GDP, meaning the economic production of the Earth, over a fourth of it. If one uses purchasing power parity to measure GDP, then the BRICS share is over 54%. Russia and China have 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals in the world. The other leader is the United States. By every measure, population, land mass, energy output, GDP, food output, and nuclear weapons, BRICS is not just another multilateral debating society. They are a substantial and credible alternative to Western hegemony. BRICS acting together as one pole of a new multipolar or even bipolar world. When the new currency launch is announced in August, the currency will not fall on an empty field. It will fall into a sophisticated network of capital and communications. This network will greatly enhance its chances of success. The BRICS are also developing an optical fiber submarine telecommunications system that would connect its members. It's being developed under the name BRICS Cable. Part of the motivation for BRICS Cable is to foil spying by the U.S. National Security Agency on message traffic carried through existing cable networks. What's behind this quest to ditch the dollar? In no small part, the answer is U.S. weaponization of the dollar through the use of sanctions. On numerous occasions from 2007 to 2014, I, meaning Jim Rickards, warned U.S. officials from the Treasury, Pentagon, and intelligence community that overuse or abuse of dollar sanctions would lead adversaries to abandon the dollar to avoid the impact of sanctions. And guys, I'm going to take a small time out. What have we seen over the course of the last year? We've seen, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we saw the United States roll out its biggest sanction package ever. I mean, they sanctioned everything and anything connected to Russia that they could. They cut Russia out of the SWIFT system. They imposed all of these different sanctions against Russia. They confiscated Russian foreign reserves. They even confiscated property of Russian nationals. So other nations look at this and they say, well, what happens if we get on the wrong side of U.S. policy or they decide they don't like us, maybe we need to prepare for this. Maybe we don't need to be so dollar dependent. And maybe we don't need to be so dependent on this U.S. controlled, U.S. dominated global financial system. And that's where BRICS enters into the picture and why you're seeing so much interest in other nations joining it. Let's go back to Jim Rickards' article. He says, such abandonment would lead to the diluted potency of sanctions, unforeseen cost imposed on the U.S., and eventually to the collapse of confidence in the dollar itself. These warnings were mostly ignored. We have now reached the first and second stages of this forecast and are dangerously close to the third. For years, the U.S. has used sanctions to punish nations like Iran, but the sanctions the U.S. and its allies imposed on Russia after it invaded Ukraine last year went far beyond previous sanctions regimes. They were unprecedented. Many other nations began to conclude they could be next if they run afoul of the U.S. on certain issues, and that fear has greatly accelerated the push to opt out of the dollar system entirely. This desire is not limited to the current targets such as Russia, but is shared by potential targets including China, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, and many others. The BRICS Plus present a realistic effort to de-dollarize global payments and eventually global reserves. For years, I've argued that the dollar would remain the world's leading reserve currency for longer than most people think. But below, I show you why a new BRICS Plus currency could greatly accelerate the demise of the dollar as the world's leading reserve currency. How could it happen so much faster than I previously thought? And he says, read on. The global desire to move away from the dollar as a medium of exchange for international trade in goods and services is hardly new. The difference today is that it's gone from a discussion point to a novelty to a looming reality in a remarkably short period of time. Dubai and China have recently concluded an arrangement whereby Dubai will accept Chinese yuan and payment for oil exports from Dubai. In turn, Dubai can use the yuan to buy semiconductors or manufacture goods from China. We talked about that at the time when it happened. Saudi Arabia and China have been discussing similar oil for yuan arrangements, but nothing definitive has been put in place. These discussions are made complicated by Saudi Arabia's long-standing petrodollar deal with the U.S. Still, some progress along these lines is widely expected. China and Brazil have recently reached a broad-based bilateral currency deal where each country accepts the currency of the other in trade. Meanwhile, there's a growing strategic relationship between China and Russia as the two superpowers jointly confront the United States. In the trading relationship between the two nations, Russia can pay in rubles for Chinese manufactured goods and other exports, while China pays in yuan for Russian energy, strategic metals, and weapon systems. Yet all these arrangements may soon be superseded by a new BRICS Plus currency, which will be announced in Durban, South Africa, at the annual BRICS Leaders Summit Conference, August 22nd through August 24th. The currency will be pegged to a basket of commodities for use in trade among members. Initially, the BRICS Plus commodity basket would include oil, wheat, copper, and other essential goods traded globally in specified quantities. In all likelihood, the new BRICS Plus currency would not be available in the form of paper notes for use in everyday transactions. It would be a digital currency on a permissioned ledger maintained by a new BRICS Plus financial institution with encrypted message traffic to record payments due or owing by participating parties. This is not a cryptocurrency because it is not decentralized, not maintained on a blockchain, and not open to all parties without approval. The latest information from the BRICS working groups is that this basket valuation methodology is encountering the same problems John Maynard Keynes encountered at the Bretton Woods meetings in 1944. Keynes initially suggested a basket of commodities approach for a world currency he called the Bancor. The difficulty is that global commodities included in any basket are not entirely fungible. There are over 70 grades of crude oil distinguished by viscosity and sulfur content, among other attributes. And then, of course, things like wheat that he mentioned earlier. Wheat can go bad. It doesn't have a very long lifespan compared to oil or gold. In the end, Keynes saw that a basket of commodities is not necessary and that a single commodity, gold, would better serve the purpose of anchoring a currency for reasons of convenience and uniformity. And we've talked recently about how 2022 was the year of the most gold accumulation by central banks globally in over 50 years. And again, what did he just say at the beginning of this article? The most significant financial event since 1971, when the dollar was severed from any remaining ties with gold. So that's when we last saw central banks accumulating gold the way we have recently. And so this stands to reason that maybe he's on to something here, and this new BRICS currency will be pegged to gold. He says, based on the impracticality of commodity baskets as uniform stores of value, it appears likely that the new BRICS plus currency will be linked to a weight of gold. This plays to the strengths of the BRICS members, Russia and China, who are the two largest gold producers in the world and are ranked 6th and 7th respectively among the 100 nations with gold reserves. And I would point out officially declared gold reserves. It's quite possible that they're sitting on the number 1 and number 2 pile of gold reserves, and maybe that's going to be announced at some later date as well in order to help destroy the United States and its allies financially, because I think that's what this is all about. It says these and related developments are frequently touted as the end of the dollar as a reserve currency. Such comments reveal a lack of understanding as to how the international monetary and currency systems actually work. The key mistake in almost all such analyses is a failure to distinguish between the respective roles of a payment currency and a reserve currency. Payment currencies are used in trade for goods and services. Nations can trade in whatever payment currency they want. It doesn't have to be dollars. Reserve currencies, so-called, are different. They're essentially the savings accounts of foreign nations that have earned them through trade surpluses. These balances are not held in currency form, but in the form of securities. When analysts say the dollar is the leading reserve currency, what they actually mean is that countries hold their reserves in securities denominated in a specific currency. For 60% of global reserves, those holdings are U.S. Treasury securities denominated in dollars. The reserves are not actually dollars. They're in securities, meaning U.S. debt. So these IOUs, these promises to pay back with interest what we've spent beyond what has been collected in taxes. So when the Treasury issues this debt, we see these countries all over the world accumulating that debt as part of their reserves when they're done trading. So it says, as a result, you cannot be a reserve currency without a large, well-developed sovereign bond market. No country in the world comes close to the U.S. Treasury market in terms of size, variety of maturities, liquidity, settlement, derivatives, and other necessary features. So the real impediment to another currency as a reserve currency is the absence of a bond market where reserves are actually invested. That's why it's so difficult to displace treasuries as reserve assets, even if you wanted. Again, no country in the world can come close to the U.S. in that regard. But here's where it gets interesting, and why the dollar could lose its leading reserve status much faster than previously thought. That's because the BRICS plus currency offers the opportunity to leapfrog the treasury market and create a deep, liquid bond market that could challenge treasuries on the world stage almost from thin air. The key is to create a BRICS plus currency bond market in 20 or more countries all at once. relying on retail investors in each country to buy the bonds. The BRICS Plus bonds would be offered through banks and postal offices and other retail outlets. They would be denominated in BRICS Plus currency, but investors could purchase them in local currency at market-based exchange rates. Since the currency is gold-backed, it would offer an attractive store of value compared with inflation or default-prone local instruments in countries like Brazil or Argentina. The Chinese in particular would find such investments attractive since they are largely banned from foreign markets and are overinvested in real estate and domestic stocks. It will take time for such a market to appeal to institutional investors, but the sheer volume of retail investing in BRICS Plus denominated instruments in India, China, Brazil, and Russia and other countries at the same time could absorb surpluses generated through world trade in the BRICS Plus currency. In short, the way to create an instant reserve currency is to create an instant bond market using your own citizens as willing buyers. The United States did something similar in 1917. From 1790 to 1917, the U.S. bond market was for professionals only. There was no retail market. That changed during World War I when Woodrow Wilson authorized Liberty bonds to help finance the war. There were bond rallies and Liberty bond parades in every major city. It became a patriotic duty to buy Liberty bonds. The effort worked, and it also transformed finance. It was the beginning of a world where everyday Americans began to buy stocks, bonds, and securities as retail investors. If the BRICS Plus use a kind of Liberty bond patriotic model, they may well be able to create international reserve assets denominated in the BRICS Plus currency, even in the absence of developed market support. This entire turn of events, introduction of a new gold-backed currency, rapid adoption as a payment currency, and gradual use as a reserve currency asset will begin on August 22nd, 2023, after years of development. Except for direct participants, the world has mostly ignored this prospect. The result will be an upheaval of the international monetary system coming, he says, in a matter of weeks. Now, that remains to be seen. I guess he's saying a matter of weeks from now, this will lead to an upheaval of the international monetary system. I can't say that I argue with what he's saying here, because I've long been saying that this fiat system, this currency system of a bunch of pieces of paper and ones and zeros created by governments that don't back their currencies, it's a Ponzi scheme, and it's doomed to failure. It's coming to its end. And what worked in the past? Well, what worked in the past was gold, silver, copper. They were real money that were used in trade. Governments can't print gold and silver and copper. They can't just wave a magic wand and it all comes about. So it's much harder to perpetrate fraud and grow a big government. So here we're seeing an alternative in a world of fiat currencies. There could be this alternative gold-backed currency. And we've talked before in the past about something else that may occur as a result of this. So we've talked before about Russia as the world's low-cost oil producer. Much lower cost. It's in the single digits per barrel of oil compared to much higher for the rest of the world. What if they were to come out, say today, oil is almost $70 a barrel, approximately $70 a barrel. So it's maybe 30 barrels of oil per ounce of gold, with gold at $2,000 per ounce. What if Vladimir Putin were to say, well, we'll deliver 60 barrels of oil for an ounce of gold, or 1,000 barrels of oil, or not 1,000, but 100 barrels of oil for an ounce of gold, something along those lines. Well, it wouldn't just change the value of those things overnight. What would happen is Well, the dollar price of gold, the dollar denominated price of gold would go up as demand for gold would skyrocket as people tried to take advantage of that, knowing they could trade an ounce of gold for twice as much oil as they could today. Or the United States and the Western financial system could say, we're going to defend the price of gold, which would mean trying to peg their currency at that amount. But that would mean that the domestic oil industry of the United States and any other country like that would not be able to compete and would just be shut down. So it would be a matter of national security. They would have to let the gold price float, and it would expose the Western fiat financial system for the Ponzi scheme that it is, because they've been manipulating the prices of gold and silver and other commodities, even oil, for years and years and years. They've been able to print dollars and in exchange these pieces of paper and ones and zeros and exchange them for real items. And they've been using sophisticated financial tools to manipulate this. But once gold enters the picture as an objective measure, once again, of trade, that will no longer be the case. And it could, I believe, be the Achilles heel of the Western financial system. Now, I don't expect that on August 22nd, the financial world is going to collapse, at least not as a result of this. But he's right in that we may look back after that date, just as we do at 1971, and say that was a critical turning point, and this could shift power away from the United States. Why is this important? Well, from a Bible prophecy standpoint, there is zero mention, no mention of the United States of America, specifically in the end times. I don't think at all, but specifically in the end times. We see talk of Russia, we see talk of Israel and all of these major players in Europe and the Middle East, but we don't hear a thing about the United States. So why is that? Well, one of the reasons is, I believe, going to be the rapture of the church, which I believe will overnight eliminate the United States as the world's economic and military superpower. But we've already seen the United States starting to wane as a superpower, and this is all going to culminate at some point financially. This may very well be it. We've been talking about the stresses on the banking system in the United States, the global depression that's coming. This is one more problem. This is one more obstacle in the way of the continuation of this monetary system that I believe has come to its end. And that's why they're talking about this great reset, because they know it's set to come to an end. It has to fall apart. The question is, what replaces it? And no doubt, guys, they're thinking about these things. We've seen just in play with what Jim Rickards was talking about, we see in Saudi Arabia. I saw this last week. It said Saudi crown prince threatened major economic consequence for the United States during oil feud last year, according to a report. It says Saudi crown prince Mohammed bin Salman threatened to impose high economic cost on Washington last year when President Biden warned of consequences to Riyadh over its decision to slash oil production, a new classified document revealed. It says, while the Saudi government maintained a public diplomatic stance, the 37-year-old de facto ruler privately threatened to reassess the Middle Eastern nation's relationship with Washington and inflict substantial economic consequences on the U.S. if it took retaliatory measures against the oil production cuts. So here we see, for the last 50 years, so since the early 70s, the United States has had this close relationship with Saudi Arabia. The dollar has been backed up by this relationship with Saudi Arabia, what we know as the petrodollar, and that Saudi Arabia would only trade oil in US dollars in exchange for protection of the Saudi kingdom by the United States military. We've talked in the past about how that's coming to an end. I would say it's come to an end. It's just a matter of the details being worked out. What does that mean? We're seeing other nations that previously were aligned with the United States and its allies moving out of that orbit. So what does that mean for United States power moving forward? I believe it means we're going to see that power go away. We're going to see the United States as the world's great military and economic superpower go away. What fills that void? I think Russia and China think it's going to be them. I think God has other plans, but this is how we're seeing this movement take place right now. And I believe it has major prophetic implications because we would see the power of the United States. This explains why the United States is not a major player on the world scene in the end times. So that was a lot. So I hope for those of you that are still around at the end after all of that, what do you think? Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think is going on here. Do you think there's more to this? Do you think August 22nd will bring this major significant turning point? Will it be a major significant turning point that just gets overlooked? I believe the United States pulling out of Afghanistan and leaving our allies behind was a major event. At the time, there was some news in the United States. A couple of weeks later, it was sort of out of the news cycle. But I believe when people look back, they'll see that that was a major inflection point when it came to relations between the United States and its allies. And I think this could be something similar that we see in August of this year, August 22nd, if they roll out a gold-backed BRICS currency. I believe it's going to change the power structure of the globe, and it may very well cause chaos in the global financial markets. So that remains to be seen. Again, I could be wrong. Leave your comments below. They're definitely welcome. And so let me know what you think. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And God willing, I will see you on Friday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Brit Gillette on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.